Right. Yeah, so, say Assalamu alaikum. I've been invited to speak to you today about my path to Islam. Thank you. I'm not sure how much you'll enjoy it. But when I listen to other people's stories, when I listen to other people and how they have embraced Islam, their path to Islam, it's something that I always enjoy and I take a lot of inspiration from. So when we hear about brothers explaining, what path they took to Islam and what made them turn to Islam, inshallah, these stories are the stories that kind of remind us about the beauty of Islam, remind us about why we did it. In many cases, it's not a case of someone embracing Islam. It's a case of, for example, there are many children here, mashallah, who are, inshallah, coming and will continue to come and also be raised in that, inshallah. And inshallah, we will do the same with our children. But yeah, as I say, I think it's maybe a slightly different story because my family are Turkish Cypriot anyway, because I'm from Cyprus. Originally, I would say I was from a Muslim family anyway, but maybe not practicing as much. So, I think before I tell you about what made me sort of, what path I took and what made me sort of embrace it more, it will make a bit more sense if I gave you a little more sort of backdrop, maybe why it's so different in Cyprus, or why many Cypriots don't practice Islam, if that makes sense. So as I say, yeah, my family are Turkish from Cyprus, so I did always consider myself a Muslim, but I didn't know much about what Islam was. Islam is not widely practiced in Cyprus. People regard themselves as Muslims, but sometimes knowledge of Islam is not really widespread. And although people regard themselves as Sunni, there's a heavy influence of different orders, such as the Naqshbandi order in Cyprus. So Islam began to spread probably in Cyprus after the Sahabi Muawiyah brought to conquer an army to conquer Cyprus at the time, and a number of Muslims probably increased considerably more once the Ottomans conquered Cyprus and encouraged many people from Anatolia to migrate to Cyprus as well. However, even though there was an influx then of Muslims from Anatolia migrating to Cyprus, a lot of that was probably lost after a while. And I'm not really a historical study. I can't really say for sure I'm the best person to ask about this as well. But the Ottomans leased the island of Cyprus to Britain. I think it was maybe 1800s, or was it? I think it was 1800s. And as a result, they say that a lot of people from Cyprus, who at the time would have been under the Ottoman Sharia, migrated away from Cyprus. So a huge number of Muslims left Cyprus because they didn't want to live under the rule of a government that wasn't based on Sharia. So you could say, maybe a lot of people that say behind in Cyprus, not everyone obviously, but a large proportion of people that would have been practicing did move away and either return to Turkey or to other countries. I think Turkey has tried to help sort of Islam increase further in Cyprus, and there is a heavy influence from Turkey, especially under Erdogan's government. There's been investment in mosques. But generally, imams in Cyprus are sent from Turkey, which probably causes sometimes friction between the people in Cyprus and the people in Turkey, because there's such a big cultural difference between the Turks in Turkey and the Turks in Cyprus. There's such a huge difference that sometimes, I wouldn't say misunderstanding, that's completely wrong, but culturally it's misunderstood. I think I'll try to make the point by saying, I think when the Ottomans conquered Bosnia, one of the things I heard is the Bosnians asked the Sultan to send imams to teach the people about Islam. And they say 5 years later, the Bosnians approached the Sultan again and said, look, how come you haven't sent anyone? We asked you to send imams, teach us more about Islam, tell us more about, about the faith. They were interested. And the Sultan said, I did actually send people. This is hearsay, no doubt. He said, I did send imams to your country, but first in those 5 years, he sent them to sort of learn the culture first, understand the people, understand their culture, and then to sort of maybe help them sort of understand Islam and embrace Islam, sort of based more along their culture, or understanding them as people first before introducing Islam to them as a people. So yeah, there's that difference. But growing up, I had no understanding of Islam apart from a few things. So when I was a kid, my parents would say, if I was doing something wrong, Allah is what you know me, which basically means grandfather Allah is what you know me. It's just, I think as a kid, it's one way they sort of always made me think that there is someone else watching you apart from me if I'm not there. And it had an effect, it had a profound effect. I would always sort of reflect and think about my actions as a young kid. So that's one thing. My mum would use that term a lot. My parents would use that term a lot. Another thing is, whenever for example, my mum would put us in a bath, she would always recite Shahadah once we'd finished. And I knew that we fasted because we were Muslim, but I didn't understand what fasting was for. And the elders in our family would pray, but only the elders. And the other thing I knew was that we were circumcised, and that's really the only Islam that most people know. And in fact, if you know Sheikh Nazim, one of the Naqshbandi sheikhs in Cyprus, he used to say that the only thing left of Islam in Cyprus was the fact that that people practiced for religious purposes, was the fact that the males were circumcised, and there's also a practice they used to do, or they do, called mevlids, in which case, when someone dies with deceased, they bring the body, they wash the body, obviously Islamic ritually, but then sort of ritually every year, sort of Quran is recited for that person, and there's not much really basis for that in Islam anyway. But these were the sort of Islamic acts sort of mostly practiced in Cyprus. As I say, I don't think my story involves anything astonishing. I don't think I did anything sort of really wild as a youngster. I didn't, I believe I had a good family upbringing. My family had a business. I would work in the family business from a very young age, so maybe from 10, 12 onwards, I'd have to go and work. And that taught me a lot of things. It taught me how to, respect a lot of things. I had respect for my parents. And I think one of the things my parents always drummed into me was sort of respectful of my actions and be careful of my actions and sort of not to hurt other people's feelings. So in that respect, I don't think I was someone that sort of very far off, I hope not, being a bad person. But Islam definitely opened me in a different way. So, as I say, I think my family upbringing was good, and but I think some things happened that sort of prepared me more to embrace Islam. And as I say, I don't really want to say it with the camera rolling as well, but yeah, there was a period of time when I used to drink a lot, and it was something to appeal to me. I don't think I actually enjoyed it, but I used to drink socially, and it was something for entertainment. So it's something I'm not really happy with, but people would drink and we would laugh at how drunk each other got, which is ridiculous as it sounds. But I stopped drinking before I embraced Islam, and things like that. I mean, some of the things I used to do stopped before I embraced Islam. So it's like something sort of came in the way of that, so there was no need for that anymore. And then when I, began to practice Islam, these things weren't hard to give up because I wasn't interested in doing them anyway. There was the mosque actually was it used to be a nightclub called the Carousel, and so yeah, before I used to practice Islam, I don't know how much you know. The mosque itself used to be called a nightclub called Carousel, and obviously the area here was completely open in the middle, and the sisters area had sort of tables and chairs, and the area here in the middle where we all sit would have been a dance floor. If I remember correctly, there was a bar there, and I used to I came to that a few times at a time, probably for the wrong, no doubt for the wrong reasons. They used to have weddings here as well, so it wasn't just a nightclub. And I think the reason why I'll tell you that a bit later, why I'm telling you that. We came to pick my brother up from here one time, and I was quite amazed. Something really shocking happened, to be honest. I remember we were waiting for my brother outside, and a guy drew a knife on me. And we can see this person was drunk, and this area, over the years, has got a lot of people sort of just hanging around outside the mosque, outside this area, intoxicated. And as I was waiting for my brother to come outside, I noticed that there was someone very drunk. He was murmuring something with someone else. So my friends and I, we crossed the road and sort of just tried to distance ourselves. And then he sort of came towards us, and he sort of pulled a big kitchen knife out. And as he stood in front of me, I don't know how this happened, to be honest. As he drew the knife, I didn't think it was possible that I would have got away. But somehow I was quick enough to sort of get away. By the time he could swing his hand, I had sort of already moved and run halfway down the street. And I don't know, I suppose the reason why I'm telling you that is because I wouldn't have come to this place for something other than Salah. But then, I suppose, and I'll come back to that later, the carousel. So, some of the things that sort of brought me a lot closer to Islam was, first of all, university. I think in my first year of university, I probably spent too long doing some of the wrong things, like partying and, again, maybe drinking. But I think maybe not doing so well in the first year sort of prepared me to sort of distance myself from things like that as well. And in the second year, I had sort of established friendships with people that sort of I appreciate a lot more. And these people weren't, to be honest, they weren't Muslim at all. But I made certain friends that were sort of maybe Muslim, and as a result, they sort of taught me more about their culture, and I didn't know much about sort of Muslims from other parts of the world. The more I learned from them, the more I realized that actually, our culture is not too far away, and it interested me to learn more. I met someone, a very close friend of mine, a girl, who taught me how to write my name in Arabic, a Palestinian Lebanese person. And just through interactions with her and friends, I sort of began to sort of understand a bit more, know a bit more. And I used to work in a place at the time. I used to work in a bingo hall, actually, which is again this place of gambling. But while I was there, I met a friend who I've noticed they'd go off every Friday, and they'd come, they'd leave work sort of lunchtime, and they'd come back after lunchtime. And as I said, I didn't know anything about Islam. The only thing I knew about Islam was I was circumcised, and I knew that we fasted, but that's about it. So, he invited me one time to come to the mosque to do Jummah, and I had no idea what Jummah. Well, actually, no, sorry, I've got all the events mixed. I'll come back to that. Sorry. 9/11 happened in England, in America, and at the time I was at sixth form actually, and my teacher sort of called me aside and he said, there's someone coming to the school to speak to sixth formers about what Islam is and to teach them, and it was Imam Shakir actually. And he started speaking about Islam. I didn't really know anything, but my teacher called me because he thought, you're sort of interested in culture, and he knew, I always spoke to my teachers about Turkish culture. So he called me together and he said, look, come, listen to this man as well. So I came, I was interested. And he spoke a lot of sense. So, what he spoke about Islam was definitely not what I knew. And at the time, being someone that sort of didn't practice very much, I would say that my knowledge of Islam would have been skewed by what the media started to throw. I would assume that, a lot of our youngsters today, the less we teach them, obviously the media teaches more. So the media will teach them what we want, in the wrong way. So yeah, my understanding of Islam was very different. But like I said, then I started to work in this bingo hall, and a friend of mine invited me to come down. And as he did, I sort of came down on one Friday, and we missed Jummah, we were late. But on the day, he showed me, okay, this is how you make the law. And then we prayed together, and then we went back. But I thought, even though I missed the khutbah, I didn't hear anything. Afterwards, I said, I'd be interested to come again, so I'd see what they used to say, what used to be heard. And so I began to come every Friday. And my friend, a lot of the time, he was an administrator in the bingo hall, so he couldn't make it every Friday. But once I'd sort of picked up that routine, I continued to come. And you know, I sort of listened for months on end, and at the time I still didn't know how to pray, but I appreciated the fact that I was doing something, and I thought this is productive, I'm learning something at the same time. And I would come and listen to the khutbahs every Friday, not knowing how to pray, just doing the actions. And but soaking it all in, so listening to everything, you know, the Imam had to say. And over a period of 6 months, it became something that you just can't stop doing, because it grows on you. Alhamdulillah, it grew on me in such a way that everything I'm learning is teaching me something that I didn't really know, and it's as they say, it's like sometimes the knowledge of Islam is like a flower, and once you start receiving, it starts to bloom. So alhamdulillah, the more I listened, the more I couldn't stop coming. And my friend wouldn't come, but I would come on my own, and I would listen. And after, I think, 6 months of coming, still not really knowing how to pray, but just listening. So, you know, hearing the Fatiha and some of the other short surahs over and over, it sort of sunk in. And this is, like I said, after 6 months. And I remember Imam Shakir was saying, you know, a lot of people come to Jummah on a Friday, but you don't see him during the rest of the week. And people also only pray on a Friday. And when he said that, I thought, wow, it's true. Why am I not praying 5 times a day? So from that moment onwards, I began straight away. I went home, and until I memorized it completely, I had a copy of the Fatiha hanging off the wall, or to the radiator where I could pray in a direction. And I would sort of read off the wall and sort of do my salah at the same time. And a lot of the time I was just repeating the same surah. But, you know, until it was something I memorized and I could do and I was comfortable with. And from that point on, you know, that is, inshallah, so we've never gone back and never will go back in the wrong direction, inshallah. So, yeah, from that point onwards, I think I was quite, you know, I would say at that point I embraced. But then I think from that point onwards, I've changed a lot as well. I think when I first embraced Islam, I would say that I probably made a few mistakes in, I probably made a few mistakes in the way I treated my family at first, and my friends. And because I was so in love with this thing that I'd learned, and this thing I've been listening to all this time, and then once I started praying, I started to read more, I started to listen to more lectures, and it's, you know, all well and good, but then I think a lot of people didn't realize the change I was going through, and they weren't sure if it was a good thing or a bad thing. And I think my parents were quite worried at the time. And I was, you know, I think because it became something I loved so much, I would say that maybe my treatment of others should have been a lot different. So my understanding suddenly became, this is what it must be, and everyone around me must do the same thing. And sometimes, you know, when I speak to people that sort of maybe just embrace Islam, one of the things I always say is, make sure, you know, you're doing things with your family know what you're doing. Keep your family ties together. You definitely don't want to lose that. So, yeah, I think for a while, I became very regimented in the way I did things. And I think maybe sort of pushed some friends away, some family away. And they couldn't understand the change I was going through. Culturally, it's not there among Cypriots anyway, so it was very different what I was doing. But you know, just over the years have gone by, they realized it wasn't something that was a phase, that something was going to come and disappear. And you know, as I continued doing it, I think one of the things I learned to do better was, one, be more accepting of others, and that's a big mistake I think when I first began, is because I wanted to do this, and I would say, right, this is the only way, this is the way it must be practiced, and so you must do the same. So I don't know, from that point onwards, I think for a while I was sort of in that sort of nature, and I find that maybe some of the circles I was with, I would say this is one thing that we should avoid as Muslims, and this is one thing I know that Imam Shakir always speaks about as well, is one, be accepting of each other, and two, remember that you're brothers. And I remember some of the things I used to think at one point. I would say in my Islam I've kind of gone full circle, and then come back and rediscovered Islam again. So practicing it thereon, like once I've reached that full circle, sort of start to do it in a slightly different way, not sort of salah and things like that. That stays the same, inshallah. But things like, for example, how you see other people. I remember some people be sort of very what's the word? I would say people were very sort of harsh with others sometimes. If someone didn't have a certain length beard, or someone didn't have trousers a certain length, or maybe said a certain word, or maybe wasn't mindful of what they said, and I don't know. I don't think it's counterproductive. I don't think it's productive. So, one thing I've definitely learned now, especially, is to appreciate every single person, because if a person is here doing salah, whatever he looks like, whatever action he's doing, inshallah, he's doing it for the sake of Allah, like you are, and and inshallah we can support each other when it comes to practicing Islam. So really, there's not much more to my story, other than maybe the one thing I would like to say is I always reflect on a few things, and one of the things I reflect on most was that I used to come to this place to do the wrong thing, and alhamdulillah, now I come to this place to lay my head on the floor for Allah's sake. So really and truly, that's all I really have to say. There's not much of a story apart from that. I know it's not a big story, no big changes, but alhamdulillah, I'm grateful for what Allah has given me, and I hope that He shares it with all of us and continues to keep us firm on our faith, inshallah.
Brother Ali.